Mr. Speaker, I'll get straight into it. The Workers' Party rejects the amendment proposed by member Mr. Liang. We have no substantive quarrel with amendment number 3, which does not substantially change the thrust of our motion. A careful examination of our proposals today would show that they would neither undermine Singapore's fiscal sustainability nor would they unduly burden future generations. However, we disagree with amendments 1 and 2. Amendment 1, which states that cost of living is a global concern, reads as an attempt to minify the role government can and should play to reduce cost of living burdens on Singaporeans. While global factors are important, these should instead prompt a review of existing policies with a view to relieve cost of living pressures. We also disagree with Amendment 2 and its use of the words continue pursuing policies. The use of the word continue suggests to us at least that the status quo is fine. We disagree. Indeed, we have proposed specific structural changes to the system that we believe will work better than current policies. The Workers' Party MPs have made concrete proposals in several areas. We urge the government to conduct a comprehensive review of its policies to better support Singaporeans and their families during this cost of living crisis. On the electricity front, MP for Aljunied GRC Sylvia Lim observed that the need for Singaporeans to conserve energy is more urgent than ever, given the risks of high prices and supply shortages caused by conflicts around the world. She recounted the government's answer to managing household energy bills was the open electricity market, but the dramatic failures of retailers in 2021 has cast doubt on the viability of the open energy market to bring down household electricity bills. She asked the government to look again at her earlier suggestion of tiered electricity pricing and to also consider lowering charges for consumption during off-peak hours. Staying on utilities and specifically water prices, my contribution to this debate was my calling on the government to review the price structure of water for both domestic and non-domestic consumers. Such a review would have the objective of creating a more fairly tiered structure that promotes water conservation and potentially lowers costs for business and many households. Aljunied GRC MP Mr. Faisal Marab reiterated the call he made in 2014 to the government to establish a means of assessing the effectiveness of our social safety net. Back then, he proposed that Singapore adopt the International Labour Organization's social protection framework. He suggested that if the government prefers a more localized framework, the government should then look at the minimum income standard published for households in Singapore, published by reports that have been published by local academics led by Associate Professor Teo Yo Yen and Dr. Ng Kok Ho. The government is not precluded from publishing its own list of basic needs and those extras required for thriving in Singapore as a way of tracking outcomes for Singaporeans. Sengkang GRC MP Ms. Herting Ru's speech covered several key nodes in health and the health and care ecosystem where the government can and should be working harder to control the cost of healthy living in Singapore. Her speech reflects the Workers' Party's concern about the effect the increasing cost of care is having on the physical and mental well-being of families and calls for more support in areas like mental health care and intermediate and long-term care. For instance, she called for Medisave annual limits to be increased in line with medical inflation. Hougang SMC MP Mr. Dennis Tan asked for the current means testing in healthcare to be improved upon to better account for an individual's financial situation and health conditions so that healthcare can be more affordable and accessible. He called for help to be given to more Singaporeans who may need more assistance, even though they may be adjudged not to be eligible based on present household income or annual value of their home, especially when they are not able to receive financial assistance from members of the same household. He called for more help to be extended to adults with special needs or other forms of disability who are in the working adult age group but who are unable to work and require part-time or full-time care from family members, especially in families where the parents are getting on in age. More help should also be extended to family members responsible for their caregiving. Sengkang GRC MP Louis Chua reiterated his call for the government to defer the GST hike in 2024, with even 1 year being a helpful deferment, especially when the government has already achieved the revenue increase which the GST hike was meant to bring. On housing, he called for the government to increase the supply of HDB flats across the for-purchase market and also the neglected for-rent market especially as our population growth and housing demand appears to have stepped up. To ensure all Singaporeans can access appropriate housing and shelter, addressing the fundamental demand-supply problem would necessitate adjustments to the supply side of the equation so that the market can find the appropriate equilibrium. On private transport, Sengkang GRC MP James Lim called for changes to the COE system that would rationalize high prices. He explained why expensive COEs affect not just households that may have very legitimate need for cars, such as families with children or the disabled, but also everyone that books a taxi or a private hire car. He stressed the importance of smoothing out the vehicle quota supply across the years and ceasing the practice of reimbursing early deregistered COEs at their book value. He also suggested prohibiting dealers from bidding directly for COEs and treating private hire cars in the same manner as taxis are, which is to have them bid in the open category, albeit paying Cat A or Cat B prices. On public transport, Aljunied GRC MP Mr. Gerald Giam called for a National Transport Corporation to be established as a publicly owned, non-profit land transport planner and operator of all MRT, LRT, and trunk bus services. This will allow the yearly profits of the current public transport operators to be redirected to benefit commuters by mitigating fare increases and providing free transport for the elderly and people with disabilities. He explained how the NTC could bring about significant productivity gains and economies of scale when compared to the current public transport model. Mr. Speaker, some of these proposals by the Workers' Party will be revenue neutral. Others will result in increased expenditures. So at the National Day rally this year, the Prime Minister shared with the public that the new classification system for HDB flats into Prime, Plus and Standard from the existing mature and non-mature classification would see the sticker price of an $877,000 five-room BTO flat in Ang Mo Kio, for example, to come down. The question is, how would this reduction in price come about? Would it be from the chief valuer relooking at how land is priced for public housing, or, as should be assumed, from an increase in taxpayer subsidies from HDB flats drawn from the yearly budget? The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that the government will look to lower HDB prices through the deployment of taxpayer dollars. Inevitably, it is the taxpayer that is going to foot the bill for a larger HDB subsidy to make HDB flats cheaper, and this is an amount that the government believes it can absorb without an increase in taxes. Otherwise, it would not have pursued the new HDB BTO classification system. In the same spirit, Mr. Speaker, the Workers' Party believes that we should continue to look beyond short-term relief in addressing this cost of living crisis and to relook at prevailing orthodoxies on other schemes so as to lower costs for Singaporeans and their families. A few of the proposals will put cash in the hands of vulnerable workers and seniors to help them navigate their way out of this difficult period, for example, by reviewing with a fresh perspective both MediSave as well as the Workfare Income Supplement. A few other proposals may prompt behavioral shifts towards greater efforts to reduce wastage and more sensitivity to sustainable usage of utilities such as water and electricity. At their core, all the proposals prompt the government to relook at its legacy policy with an eye on battling the cost of living crisis that Singaporeans find themselves deeply mired in. Mr. Speaker, it has been a long day, but I would like to thank all members, including the office holders, PAP MPs, PSP and CMPs, and the single NMP for participating in this important motion. I may not have referred to all of you in my roundup speech, but I thank you for your participation. The Workers' Party will vote in favour of the original motion and reject the amended motion for the reasons I have provided earlier in my roundup speech. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.